Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Welcome to Dev with Excel. Alright, it's exciting to be here today. So in this video, we shall be solving exercise 3.15, and that is the step 3 of the PhoneBook database in part 3, right? Alright, so the instruction says change the backend so that deleting PhoneBook entries is reflected in the database. Verify that the front end still works after making these changes. All right, so in the previous video, we solved exercise 3.14, and here we saw how we could add new numbers to the database, right? And also we were able to do that from both the back end and the front end, right? That means that the front end was properly integrated to that change. All right, so in this video, we are solving exercise 3.15, and here we want to see how we can implement the delete function in the back end so that it also works for the front end. All right, so going into the code implementation, this is my VS Code. Let me just do this. All right, so here I have the setup folder for this exercise, which is db underscore step 3. The previous folder I used or we used is this, right? So this is just a duplicate of this one for now until we begin making the necessary changes. All right, so I'm going to delete every file open here, and then go to db step 3 and then get into index.js. All right, so currently this is the working stage we have in this application. This does exactly what we did in the previous exercise, so we don't really need to do much on this. All right, so let's begin with today's video, right, which is exercise 3.15. All right, going back to the instruction, um it says change the backend so that deleting phone book entries is reflected in the database. Verify that the front end still works after making these changes. So as we can see, we have the database which is open here. We have 5 items currently residing in this database, in this collection, right? So let's see if we can perform a delete request for now. Okay, so going to the Thunder client, this is something we've been using. We've been using this in place of the Postman or REST clients, right? So let's see if we can perform a delete request. Okay, so currently, let's do a get request to see what we have. Okay, run this. Let's run this particular application. So we cd into the path and we do npm run dev. Okay, so while this is running, let's do a get request. Okay, so these are the data we have in the database right now, right? Now let's see if we can delete one of these. Let's see if we can delete the extra John team we have. So as we can see, we have John team existing twice here, right? So let's see if we can delete one of these. Let's delete this last one. So going to the Thunder client using the delete request, let's paste in this ID and then click send. So it says 404, right? So this returns an error, right? So this is more like an error. All right, so that means that the implementation for the delete function is yet to be implemented. So let's do that right away. All right, so in the previous videos, we implemented both the get and the post request, right? So we just come underneath this part here and then begin with the delete request, right? So here is what we can do. We begin by saying app.delete, and then we say API slash percent. All right, so let's even go to the material and see, because I actually don't want it to look like I'm the one just trying to write all of these things, because they also reside in the material. Let's see how it is done in the material using the delete request, right? Okay, I think it's somewhere around here. So here is it, right? So You could just copy this and then begin to edit some part of it, but that's fine also, but I think it's just good we just type it out. All right, so after doing this, the next thing we need to do is we need to specify the ID which we want to delete, right? By using the colon ID, right? So the next thing we want to do is we write the rec res, which represents the request and the response. All right. So we say person dot find. Now we are going to be using find ID and delete, right? Because we want to find a particular ID that belongs to a data, and when that is found, we delete the data that is connected to the ID, right? So we say rec dot params, excuse me, params dot ID, right? Now this rec dot params dot ID, this represents the ID that is passed in through this endpoint here, right? So once it finds this ID in the database, it locates the data bearing that ID and deletes it. That's the idea. So we say dots, then we pass in results. We say results, then we could just do something like this because this is going to return a promise, right? So that's why we are having the dot then. Then we say res dot status. Now this should give us a 204, right? Dot end. Okay, so let's see if this works. Let's save this. Let's save this and then let's go back to the Thunder client and see if this is going to work now. Let's click on this 204, right? Remember that we were trying to delete this particular excess John team, right? We tried to delete John team with this number 09786, and this is the ID which we passed here. We can see that this ends with B7, right? Which is this B7. Let's confirm it here. This also ends with B7, right? This part. All right, so let's be sure that it's this John team that got deleted. Let's perform another get request and see that this John team data is going to be removed from here. All right, so here we can see that we have just one John team now, right? We have just one John team. Now going to the database, let's be sure that this is also reflecting in the database. So let's refresh it. We can see that we are still having 1 out of 5 here. That's because we've not refreshed. Let's refresh this. Now we have 1 out of 4. So here we can see that we have just one John team with the extra John team deleted, right? So that shows that our code implementation worked fine. Okay, so let's go back to the instruction again and see if there are other things we need to implement. Okay, so change the backend so that deleting phone book entries is reflected in the database. Verify that the front end still works after making the changes. All right, so when we check through the material, right, the lessons before this particular exercise, we are going to see that there's a form of error handling that is being implemented, right? So here we can see that there's a use of catch there's a use of catch here, right? So this signifies error handling. So I think it's also okay that we also implement error handling to the 3 endpoints we have currently, right? So that's before we complete this exercise 3.15, because we also need to verify that the front end also works after making those changes. So before that, let's implement the let's implement the error handling also. All right, so here is what we can do. We are simply going to be using the then. So let's begin with this part, right? So what can we do here? After performing this entire code implementation, the next thing we can do is we can just, okay, so Let's save this again. So I think inside this particular part here, we can just remove this and then place this in a dot then, right? So that it's going to return a promise. So this is what I actually mean. We could just come to the next line and say if persons. Now this persons here is this person, right? So this persons, we want to add it here. We want to be sure that we can find persons, right? So we say if persons, and then we say res.json persons. So we just push this up, right? Then also we use an else statement, and then we say else res.status. Now the status code here should be 404. That's if we cannot find the data percent, right? Then we say dot end, right? This is fine. All right, so this works fine. So the next thing we want to do is we want to use a catch block, right? So we can simply use a catch block here. So this catch block here is what is going to handle the errors, right? This if else statement is just conditional statement to help us to confirm if persons exist, right? But this one we want to write now is a catch block, and this signifies the error handler. So we simply just say catch error, then we do something like this. So that means if there's an error, we want to at first console the error. Let's say console log error, right? And then also we can also send the error also through the back end. So we can say status 500. Now 500 is internal server error, right? So that means that if we cannot find the person's data, that means there's an internal server error. So let's be sure that this get request is not broken. Let's go back again to perform a get request. Let's click on send. All right, fine. So get request is not broken. It's still working as expected. All right, so that's awesome. So the next thing we want to do is we want to also work on this post request, right? So to work on this post request, might not really need to type too much. We could just come here and then copy this catch block we have here and then make necessary edits. So we could just copy this and then come to this part here, this part before this last curly brace and round brackets, right? So we could just come here and then remove this and then paste what we just copied. So let's save this. It's going to format it for us properly. Then let's make the necessary edits, right? So here, this part is okay. This part is okay. This part now, we want to say the status code should be 505. Sorry, 500 as it were. Excuse me. Then we want to return it. We want it to return a JSON, right? And then we say error colon. Then we can simply just write something like name, or sorry, you could simply just say failed to save person, failed to save person, right? Because this is a post request, it's expected to send data to the database, right? So if this does not work, the error should be handled and the message should come out as failed to save person, right? So we could just put an exclamation mark here. All right, so let's see if that works. That's for the post request. Going to the Thunder client again. Let's go to the post. Let's see if we can add this data dev with Excel. So let's click on send. All right, so this works. We can see we have a 200 okay, right? So this works. So let's be sure that this works. Let's go to the get. Let's perform a get request and see if that returns also. So here we have dev with Excel, right? So also let's confirm in the database if the database is properly integrated to that change. All right, so let's refresh this. We are expected to get a 1 of 5 here. All right, so here we have 1 of 5. And also here we have dev with Excel, right? So this works fine. All right, so that's for the post request. So there's a reason why we actually doing this one after the other, right? So that it will not be as if like after when we've made all the changes, then we begin to run our code and then we begin to run into bugs and errors. That might be difficult to begin to debug, right? So it's better for us to watch out for all of these things while in the process of coding, right? Okay, so the next one we want to work on is the delete. All right, so for the delete, we could just copy what we have in this post here, the catch we have here, and then here, um, not here, sorry, here, we could just paste this here, then we save, then we change this error message here, right? So we could just come here and say malformatted ID, right? So that means that there's something wrong with the ID passed in, right? So this is still the way it's done in the material, the full stack open material, right? So I think this is good. We can change this to 400. 400 I think is a bad request. So let's change this to 400. Here 204, okay. So let's save this. So let's perform a delete request. Before then, let's perform a get request, or let's just come here to pick one of these data's ID. Let's pick the ID for dev with Excel. Let's copy it and then go to delete and then perform a delete request. So let's click on send. So it says 204 no content, right? So let's come here. Let's perform a get request again to see if we see have dev with Excel. So we click on send. So here we can see dev with Excel is gone, right? That confirms that the delete request was properly written, right? Okay, so coming to the database, let's refresh it to be sure that dev with Excel is gone also. All right, so here we can see that dev with Excel is gone as well, right? So that shows that our code implementation works fine. Okay, all right, so coming back to index.js. So the backend at this point works fine, right? It works fine. So let's go to the front end. Now, let's recall that the essence of this exercise is just this delete request, right? But we had to do some edits for the error handling on other HTTP requests, such as the get and the post, right? So the main point for this exercise is handling or working on the app.delete. All right, so here, let's just comment this delete code implementation. Let's comment it and then let's save our code because we want to try out something. Let's go to our front end, and if you recall, we used the phone book step 9. We use this setup folder for our front end, right, in the previous exercises. So here we are still going to use this also, right? So we simply just copy this. We copy the path to this folder and then we cd here and then we run it. So we do npm run dev. All right, so let's just allow it to run properly. Okay, now so let's see if we can access the front end from here. Let's refresh this page. All right, so these are the data we have in the database, right? They are reflecting here. Let's see if we can delete John Team here. Let's click on delete. It says delete John Team. Let's click on OK. So it says error deleting person, right? So that means that there's something wrong in the back end. That's why we are not able to delete this. So we simply just go back to the back end and we uncomment this part. So let's save this part and then let's go back to the front end and see. Let's refresh it and see if we are able to delete John Team. So let me click on delete. It says delete John Team. Okay. Now John Team is gone, right, from the front end. Let's see if this is integrated properly with the database. So we come to the database. We can see John Team is still here because we are yet to refresh this page. Let's refresh and then see what happens. So let's wait for it while it loads. So here we can see that we are left with Arto, Excel, and Anna. John Team was deleted via the front end, right? So here we can see that we can perform these CRUD operations either from the front end or the back end because everything is well integrated up until this point, right? So I think with this we have been able to successfully implemented the code for this exercise. Let's go back to the instruction to confirm if everything is properly done. All right, so exercise 3.15, it says change the backend so that deleting phone book entries is reflected in the database. Verify that the front end still works after making the changes. Yes, the front end works also after making all these changes. All right, friends, so with this, I think we've come to the end of today's exercise, right? If you found this video helpful, if you think you enjoyed it, please give my video a like and subscribe to my channel. You can as well share the link of this video. All right, see you guys in the next video. Bye.